Investigator Brendan Keefe with Atlanta News First Investigates. And pardon the interruption here, because we do have some breaking investigative news. We have just obtained an internal memo from the DEA, that is the Drug Enforcement Administration. This memo shows they have dismantled their entire airport program nationwide. That is the program we uncovered at Atlanta News First Investigates, showing that DEA agents were searching innocent passengers at boarding doors for departing flights from Atlanta and airports across the nation. The reason they were doing this is they were seizing money from innocent passengers, ostensibly under the guise of seizing money from drug dealers, suggesting that drug dealers were traveling with cash in order to purchase drugs to then return back to places like Atlanta from places like California with those drugs. The problem with that program, as we uncovered, is that they were seizing money with no evidence of drug dealing, and then they were forcing these innocent passengers to fight to get their own money back from the federal government, sometimes for years and often unsuccessfully, so that the government was able to seize this money, again with no evidence of drug dealing, suggesting it was the proceeds of drug dealing. This DEA memo, give me just 2 seconds, I'm going to put my glasses on here, shows that the DEA administrator says, based on an internal review that followed our investigation at Atlanta News First Investigates, I am directing the operations division to immediately cease the program and to work with the special agents in charge, those are the people who run the DEA offices in multiple cities, to redeploy those resources to global supply chain and illicit finance investigations. What they found was that in 3 years, they only seized $22 million. That's a lot of money, obviously. And it only resulted in 57 arrests. But compared with the rest of the DEA, they had seized $1.4 billion in that same time period and arrested thousands of individuals. What the DEA administrator found after doing this internal review, because of our investigation, is that the cartels, the criminal networks they're trying to disrupt, aren't using cash with mules at airports. They're saying the cartels like the Sinaloa and Jalisco cartels have expanded their money laundering methods and today increasingly use cryptocurrency. That means they're not using cash at airports, so the money they were seizing was from people who were not involved in drug dealing by and large. We did do a story on this following November's decision by the Department of Justice to order the DEA to stop or to suspend this operation. So that program was suspended in late November, and now it has been ordered to be stopped nationwide. They're actually redeploying those agents to other operations. They are effectively dismantling this entire program because of our investigation. Take a look at the story we filed when they suspended the program.
You're either going to sign a consent form saying that you're allowing us to search them.
Whatever you guys are doing in this airport,
or I'm going to detain them.
Is totally wrong.
Run my dog on it and get a search warrant.
I'm a random search, guys.
I didn't feel like I could have said no.
So those white folks, and I'm the random search.
No, there's no way this is random.
Innocent passengers searched at the gate by plainclothes drug agents looking to seize cash.
You're taking people's money based off an assumption.
I work hard for my money.
How many innocent people do you have to search before you find what you're looking for?
Sir, I've got nothing to say to you.
The DEA still hasn't answered our questions, but this 2-year Atlanta News First investigation,
Why do people have to prove themselves innocent?
would lead to a single incident that would end the entire program nationwide.
Oh, that's my. Hey.
That's yours. Where's your bag at?
I don't consent to search, sir.
You don't have to consent. Where's your backpack at? Where is it? Under your seat?
It got put away, but I don't consent to being searched.
I don't care what your consent stuff.
Had you not seen our investigation, what would you have done?
I would have just assumed that it was part of a standard screening procedure and consented to the search.
David recorded the incident on the very same phone where he had watched our investigation in plain sight. He stopped recording only to double check the article so he could stand up for his rights.
I didn't consent to be searched. Like, I dragged off the plane here. Is that accurate?
So you walked off the plane. I didn't drag you off. I took your bag off the plane. So
you took the bag off my plane. Okay.
Tell your story.
Back to detain, not you.
Yeah, you're trying this legal stuff. It's not going to work, dude.
This particular passenger said no, did not give consent,
Correct.
And the task force officer removed his bag from the plane anyway.
And to do that,
the agent needed reasonable suspicion.
The Inspector General of the U.S. Department of Justice reopened his investigation of the DEA's airport cold consent encounters after seeing the video David recorded.
We wouldn't do this and be doing it across the country if it was illegal.
Without the subject thinking to immediately use their cell phone to record the event, we certainly wouldn't have known about it. In fact, we clearly wouldn't have known about it because absent that video, there was no record of the incident.
The DEA had no record because agents didn't find drugs or cash in David's bag.
The DEA wasn't keeping records of its encounters unless it found cash or drugs.
And they promised you they would.
And they promised us after our first report a decade ago they would.
Once they learned of your latest investigation, they were going back and filling out these reports from months earlier?
It turned out because they hadn't found any cash or drugs when they did the search of that individual, they hadn't prepared any paperwork at the time. When we began our investigation and asked for the paperwork, that's when, months later, they started creating paperwork trying to lay out why they did what they did.
David's name was put on a DEA list because he bought a last-minute ticket.
When you buy a last-minute ticket, we get alerts.
In some cases, the only reason for the so-called cold consent encounter was a purchase of a last-minute ticket. I purchased a last-minute ticket to come interview you.
Approaching individuals based solely on that basis, without any lead, any other information to suggest they might be a drug courier or money launderer, was concerning.
The Inspector General discovered David's last-minute ticket was reported to the DEA by an airline employee who was a regular paid informant.
A single commercial airline employee received tens of thousands of dollars, effectively a cut of the money seized.
It turned out that the individual was getting a percentage of the amount seized on multiple occasions over a longer period of time.
Informants are being paid with confiscated property from searches that the informants triggered with no real evidence. It's obvious why that's a potential abuse and a potential violation of civil rights.
U.S. Senator John Ossoff of Georgia launched his own inquiry with the Department of Justice, citing the findings of our investigation.
What was the most troubling thing you saw in our reporting?
There is an economic incentive to stop, search, and confiscate, even where there was little or no, in many cases, no evidence implicating the person searched, and where here in Georgia it appears that there may have been racial profiling involved.
Senator Ossoff's inquiry and the Inspector General's report landed on the Attorney General's desk within days of each other.
It is a scathing description of serious deficiencies in this program that impact the constitutional rights of my constituents in Georgia. And I don't know whether without reporting from Atlanta News First, that would have come to light.
We are recommending, which is what we did in the report, immediately suspending these activities, which the department did.
This is the directive from the Deputy Attorney General of the U.S. Department of Justice, ordering the DEA to stop searching innocent passengers at departure gates nationwide.
I'm not sure that this change, this investigation, and this halt to potentially very problematic DEA practices would have occurred without your reporting. You have been on this story helping to expose what appear to be potentially serious civil rights violations.
Now, at Hartsfield Jackson and airports across the nation, there's no sign of plainclothes drug agents searching passengers at the boarding door. The agents appear to have departed. It's unclear if they'll ever return.
And now we know that they will not return. Now, nothing stops the DEA from restarting this program, but that was a suspension you saw in that story there. We found out in November. We went up to Washington, D.C. in December. We interviewed the Inspector General of the Department of Justice. And again, this was voluntary based on what the Inspector General found following our investigation. The DEA was ordered by the Deputy Attorney General to suspend the program. The DEA told us at that time that they were doing their own internal review. We didn't know how robust that internal review was until we got this memo in the last several hours. We got this from a source, and that source gave us, again, this internal 2-page memo from the administrator of the Drug Enforcement Administration, and it orders the cessation of the entire program. Now, look, you could say, okay, they're just stopping. Maybe they want to just see if the heat, let it calm down, let this kind of blow over, and then we'll restart the program. That's not what the administrator of the DEA wrote, because they're reassigning these agents to cryptocurrency and international drug trafficking investigations. That means they're not going to be at the airport. This does not prevent DEA agents from stopping legitimate suspects of drug trafficking. It just stops them from fishing expeditions looking for money on passengers, because we know from our investigation that if they find $5,000 or more in a passenger's bag, they almost always seize it, even when there is zero evidence of any kind of drug trafficking, based solely on a last-minute ticket and then the destination city. Atlanta to LA, cash, they're going to seize it each and every time. That's not going to happen anymore. We know this from this particular program, but we also know that it wasn't effective. They basically said it was just not a good use of the agency's resources. And that is coming from the administrator. That changes the culture of the DEA, because when the boss says this isn't worth our time and money, then no one is going to do this going forward. There is going to be a new administration in a matter of days. We're talking about next week. There's going to be a totally new administration. Nothing stops the next Attorney General and DEA administrator from restarting this program, which is why the Institute for Justice is arguing that there needs to be legislation. The FAIR Act has been pending in Congress for years. It did pass the House in the last session. Unanimously, I said pass the House Judiciary Committee, went to the full House floor, but didn't get a vote before the end of the session. So it would have to be reintroduced. So legislatively and under the current statute, there is no ban on this program. This is simply a voluntary cessation of the program by the DEA. But again, they're dismantling the superstructure of all of this. And that's why it is so important, because to restart this program, they would have to go against what they're saying here, which is that it's not an effective program to begin with. The number of arrests and the amount of money seized simply wasn't worth the amount of resources they were dedicating to this. The other thing that they also found out in their own internal review was that the DEA was not fully complying with its Transportation Interdiction Program policy, including to document all consensual encounters when they occurred. That's what the Inspector General found. It's also what we found when we started looking for records. This is how we couldn't show that the DEA was racially profiling, simply because they didn't keep records of who they stopped. They only kept records when they would actually seize the currency. If they searched someone and found nothing, they weren't keeping records of that, even though they promised the Inspector General they would, and the DEA's own policy required them to do so. In fact, as you heard in the story a moment ago, the Inspector General, when they started investigating that office, the DEA agents involved in David's case actually went back and created the paperwork, sort of backdating, if you will, the paperwork, because there was no documentation of David's stop. David was a minority, like many of the other people we saw. We did see with Clayton County Police, they were doing racial profiling, and so we do know that that was happening because of the statistics that we found there. So let's just reiterate why we're on the air right now, wrapping up this breaking news, and why we're sort of breaking in here to Atlanta News First Plus, is because we have this memo now showing that the Drug Enforcement Administration has ordered the complete stop and cessation of a nationwide program that was searching innocent passengers at boarding doors at airports here in Atlanta and across the nation, and they are stopping it because of what we uncovered at Atlanta News First Investigates. Our investigation led to David seeing that and then recording him saying no and refusing the search, even though he had nothing to hide, even though there was nothing in his bag. That led to the Inspector General doing a deep investigation. That led to the Deputy Attorney General ordering the DEA to suspend the program, and now that has led the DEA to stopping the whole program nationwide. And that's the story here. From Atlanta News First Plus, I'm Chief Investigator Brendan Keefe. We'll see you next time.